In the world of politics, there is a lot going on. City Council still in chaos. Donald Trump's legal troubles mount, and the midterms less than 3 weeks away. Lots of stuff happening on the international scene. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. She is here, as she is every Thursday, to break it all down for us. Good morning, Caroline.
Happy Thursday, Giselle. Great to see you.
And to you, my friend. So we start with the breaking news. British Prime Minister Liz Truss resigns. Her disastrous 6 weeks in office make her the shortest-serving prime minister in history. What is the impact there, and what's the impact here?
Well, we likely won't feel much, but it's absolute chaos in the UK. What is happening is that Liz Truss made a fatal mistake. She put folks into her cabinet who were less qualified because she didn't want an internal threat to her leadership. And she ended up passing an economic package that wasn't vetted. It didn't have forecasting, and it sent the country into economic turmoil. The pound dropped considerably, and now she is paying the price for that. And a local news station had a head of lettuce on a live webcam and asking whether or not it would outlast Liz Truss's leadership. And indeed, you know, the lettuce won.
Wow, just a stunning turn of events. So I want to ask you now to our own local crisis. Councilman Kevin DeLeon finally made some public comments refusing to resign despite holding up city business and widespread calls for him to step down. A spokesman also for Gil Cedillo said he remains at a place of reflection. So how does this city move forward? What's at stake here?
Well, Cedillo is out in December. The big question is whether DeLeon will hold on to his position. The city council cannot remove either of these men because there is not a criminal investigation, but they have been removed from their committee assignments. The big question is whether or not there will be enough public pressure on DeLeon to remove him from office. It doesn't appear that that is the case. It looks like he's planning to ride this out.
Yeah, it certainly does. All right, we'll keep us posted on that. Let's move on to Donald Trump's mounting legal issues. A federal judge orders the release of these emails that John Eastman apparently wrote, and he's going to release them to the January 6th committee. The judge says the emails are evidence of former President Trump's effort to subvert the 2020 election. Is this the smoking gun, Caroline, the committee has been hoping for?
Well, it's more, I think, like a brick in a wall of evidence that there were hijinks during this election. These particular emails appear to verify that Donald Trump knew that the numbers that he was filing in these lawsuits were simply fiction. He knew that they weren't accurate. And so this speaks not only to the obstruction of justice charge that he is possibly facing and others in his camp, but also the charge of defrauding the U.S. As you know, that this is a federal investigation. There are also investigations underway in New York and Georgia. The question is when these investigations will actually lead to charges with all of the evidence that we have. But again, this is just the latest wrinkle here.
Right. And in a social media post, I'm sure you saw it, Donald Trump was critical of U.S. Jews, saying they have to get their act together and appreciate what he did for them in Israel before it's too late. The Biden administration called these comments insulting and anti-Semitic. What's the significance or the danger?
Well, we're seeing a rising tide of anti-Semitism in the United States from white supremacist groups, from individuals engaging in violence, as we have under, we saw this under Trump's presidency, the Tree of Life massacre. It's anytime we are normalizing racist or anti-Semitic or sexist or ableist language, it makes it common and it makes folks act upon it. So his words matter. I guess that's the bottom line.
All right, let's turn to the midterms now, just 3 weeks out and a lot on the line. Polls show the economy has taken over threats to democracy and even abortion as voters' top issues. What are you hearing?
That's absolutely happening. We've seen a dramatic shift in the last 3 weeks from folks focusing on the overturn of Roe v. Wade, as well as the January 6th committee and issues of democracy, to inflation and crime. Those are the primary issues now, and that's benefiting Republicans. We know in the generic congressional ballot that we've seen quite a swing, and they're up now favored 3 points over Democrats. Of course, that's a generic ballot, and these are individual races, 435 races, but it's a bellwether, an indicator that independents might break for Republicans as we head into the midterm elections.
Well, we've already seen massive record-breaking early voting in Georgia. Pre-election voting across the country is matching 2018's high turnout. What does that tell you?
It generally says that Democrats will be favored in the election. And just the fact that Democrats have a fighting chance in a midterm election when you have a president whose poll ratings are underwater, meaning lower than 50%, is a remarkable feat. The question is whether or not I think the momentum from Roe will be enough to benefit Democrats. I think that's what's driving this. If you look at the tea leaves, what we've seen is a massive increase in voter registration as a result of Roe, mostly for women, but not exclusively. And I think that's probably what we're seeing in terms of turnout. And frankly, this election is going to come down to turnout.
Right. I have to ask you about what's happening in Ukraine because it is pretty significant, this shift, as you know, President Putin announcing martial law in these four, annexed areas, giving ultimate power now to the military on the ground. What does that tell you?
Well, it actually doesn't shift much for him. It gives him more power to make arrests and detain folks. But because Russia doesn't have boots on the ground in these regions, the Russian-backed leaders are actually scrambling to get folks out of these regions because they know there's going to be a Ukrainian counteroffensive. And so at the end of the day, this appears to be a bit of smoke and mirrors, but one that will inspire a response from Ukraine and hopefully won't increase civilian casualties. But it doesn't actually change Putin's fortunes on the battlefield.
So Kevin McCarthy said there will be no blank check for Ukraine if the GOP wins the majority in the House. Does his stance show a growing number of Americans are tired of funding this war?
No, in fact, looking at polls, we don't have a Ukrainian fatigue. We are still pretty focused on the region. Vast majority of Americans, about 2/3 of Americans, support the idea of making sure that Ukraine has the weapons and funding that it needs to fight this war. It will be interesting, I think, very unpopular for Republicans if they try to turn the U.S. position and not fund these efforts in Ukraine.
And as you know, I keep asking you this because California seems poised to make a critical difference on who controls the House in November. We have 5 seats that seem to be up for grabs. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, it certainly feels that way, but I think it's a little more complicated in the sense that Republicans need 5 seats to retake the House, which it looks probable at this point. And California has 5 seats that are kind of up for grabs, which could shift in the Democratic direction. But, the House is 435 races, and there are at least 11 seats nationwide where it looks like it will, pretty probable that it's going to flip from Republican to Democrat. And so California might stave off some of the loss, but it's still likely a Republican win in 3 weeks.
Never a dull moment, right, Caroline?
Indeed.
Right. Thanks so much, as always, for your perspective and insight. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Always wonderful having you with us. Thank you.